Hi my loves, how's it going? How you guys doing? Welcome if you're new, welcome back if you've seen me before. I think it's high time that I post an update for this series. I got a little bit busy, then I kind of didn't have the time or like the scheduled time to kind of do this video, but then I also wasn't reading enough. So this has really taken a back burner, but I have been posting this over on TikTok and doing like a shelf scrapper series. I have had some changes in my room. Initially I had books on my bedside table, now I've ended up buying an extra bookshelf, so that's where all my hardbacks go on now. So I don't have as much of a stack as I used to. However, I still do keep a stack of books on my bedside table. They only fit into this one bag, and I also now have so many books in my physical TBR that I want to get through them. So I guess it's like a mix of two different projects. One is Shelf Scrapper, the other one is reading from my physical TBR, and essentially we've got this reading channel and challenge, and I feel like I need to create a new name for it because I'm mixing two different ones and it doesn't really make sense. But I am also doing Shelf Scrapper over on TikTok, and it's just been a nice way for me to like keep up to date and also trying to get myself into reading a little bit more, and that's been really nice. But I have had a couple of books and I think I probably have another like couple of weeks before I post this video, so I thought I would like just go through some of the other books I've read so far. I think the last time I checked, when I went through and updated my like book spreadsheet, which I'm not gonna lie has actually turned out to be very helpful, I think I had 297 books that have not been read, which is an insane amount, but I feel like it could be worse, and I feel like it has been worse at one point. But we are at a point where I would really like to make progress, and I have decided that I do want to just read through what I have, but then eventually just get rid of things that I don't really like, because what's the point of keeping books if you're not really gonna like enjoy them, or you don't really love them unless they have some kind of a significance for you. At least that's what it is for me. But I do have a couple of books to go through with you guys. I have read all 5 books that are part of the Hunger Games. I can only hold 3 at a time, so let's get started. So I read the first 3 books last year. So we started with the Hunger Games, and this was a book I was supposed to read with my young cousins before their summer holiday, and before the end of the summer holiday, and we were gonna go like have a session and maybe like grab coffee or something and just like discuss the book. And I'm not gonna lie, I really love this, and I don't know why I haven't read the Hunger Games literally until last year. It's insane to me, but I have found that a lot of these older books that were so hyped up back then, I'm really loving and really enjoying. And I feel like a lot of the new books people haven't really liked as much, or there's not really that great reviews about them. But I'm so glad I finally picked up the Hunger Games to read, and it's literally because 2 of my young cousins were like, okay, let's read them, let's do this, and I was like, all right, cool, let's do it. I cried. I mean, I'm not surprised. I cried surprisingly quite a lot, but these books are so freaking wonderful. Peter has my heart. Like, he's such a sweet guy. And I'm not gonna lie, these are so well written. There is so much about this that you can kind of like put in place to how the world kind of is today, a little bit. Like, it kind of makes sense in some aspects, but I've actually forgotten what I've read in this book. But I will say that I did get through this at a decent pace. The way Katniss, I've obviously seen the movie, so I obviously knew what happened beforehand, but the way Katniss like volunteered for her sister was very sweet of her. But it's insane to know like all the things that they sort of had to go through. Like, obviously you knew that the games were really bad, but I don't think you really fully realize the context and how deep it is until you read the books, because there's so much more detail in here versus the books. I'm not gonna lie, Gail's character kind of annoyed me a little bit at certain parts, but I can't be too mad at him. But I feel like at times it was just like he had a very different perspective of his relationship with Katniss and what she had of him, and I feel like they were kind of like not seeing eye to eye in a sense. And understandably he was feeling very jealous, and I think that's a good phrase to use towards Peter and the affection that she was showing towards him during the games. But I feel like the way Katniss is like narrating the book, obviously I know a lot of people have said this, but I feel like she can be quite unreliable, because I don't really like to use the word that she's angry. I mean, obviously she is, because this is barbaric what's being done, but I feel like she has a very like screwed way of narrating the book, because we're obviously reading from her perspective, and I would really like to read Peter's perspective because he was also in the games with her. And I feel like quite early on you can kind of pick up that there's certain levels of similarities between herself and Haymitch, and the way they just sort of get each other. Like, it's insane how well they are in that sense. The relationship that she and Peter had was obviously quite rocky, but I really like how the characters are sort of like meshed into one another in a way. I literally love the series. I really want to reread it again before the end, before the next actual movie comes out in the cinema, and I think it's coming out like end of November or something. But I really love this. We move over to the second book in the series, and generally thought, okay, maybe things might be a little bit different. Things amp up times 10 in this book, and the characters that you sort of see in this book are also very interesting, and the fact that the 75th games were as insane as they were, yeah, that's when you really realize that Present Snow is insane, the capital insane, and there's no like end to the level of evil and difficulty that the districts have to sort of live through. But I really liked reading this book, and I really loved some of the characters. I felt really bad for Wyrist and what happens to her, because I feel like the way that she was kind of talking, it kind of just makes it seem like she's definitely been tortured within the capital for her to be the way that she is now. I really liked how smart Beatty is, and how difficult it was sort of for Haymitch to get Katniss to trust everybody else. Like, she's still very much in like survival mode and wanting to like kill everyone else, but I don't think she realizes that everybody else, or the majority of other people, are trying to like join forces to sort of like end the barbarianism, which I don't really think is a word, of the capital and what the games really stand for. But it's also insane how all of these people who initially thought that they finally had a chance at freedom are now being pulled back into the games. Also, after reading Hamish's story, you kind of really see him differently in this book as well. Like, I felt really bad when his name was called. Obviously Peter volunteered, because it kind of just made sense for him to do that. And I think I wish in the movies it sort of also portrayed that he lost a leg and he had a prosthetic. Obviously that would be really difficult, I guess, to kind of, I don't really know how difficult it would be. I don't really edit movies or make them, but it would have been interesting if they had kind of portrayed that in the movie too, because that was the big thing towards the end of the last book, that he obviously had to go through that whole process. But it was kind of nice that he had volunteered for Haymitch, and I don't necessarily think Haymitch would maybe have survived that, but I also really feel bad for him as a character, because you don't really realize the depths of what happened until you read book 5 in the series. But again, so well written. And then we move over to the last book in the series, and again, this one made me cry, but I was expecting to cry a lot more in this book than I actually ended up crying. Again, so well written, was insane, had its moments. I feel really bad for Katniss, and like, because of her losing her sister in the way that she did, because I feel like the way the bombs had dropped was just so wrong. And I initially thought it was the capital, but generally I just don't feel like it is anymore. Like, there was no way that would have been the case, because I know that her and Snow had a very specific relationship. Even though the two of them hated each other, there was one thing that they had, and that was to always be honest with one another. And the fact that when they had the conversation, she realized that he didn't drop the bombs, and it was actually most likely District 13 that had done that, is insane. Obviously, BT, when you read book 5, you realize why he sort of did that, and I don't really want to say much because I don't remember if there was much about that in these books. Gail not seeing what's wrong and what the issue with certain things are. I think him and Katniss really like butted heads quite a lot, and it was kind of sad to see that the way the relationship sort of like almost moved on or ended. But like, I think when you finish reading and like you sort of read deep the perspectives, you kind of realize that when you're in that sort of situation, there is multiple ways that people would sort of like have an outlook or see certain situations. Like, for Katniss, it was very much one thing, and she experienced both capital and the districts, and obviously the Hunger Games herself physically. And for Gail, it's very much a different thing, where he just has so much hatred, like that entire thing needs to just be burnt to the ground and restarted again. But yeah, the one thing I did think was quite nice is right at the end, she finally had a choice and ended up like having children with, if you haven't read the books, I'm so sorry, but like she's finally got to like end up in a place where she's able to make her own choice and like decide to have children, because she feels in a sense safe enough to do so. And I feel like, again, like, this book so well written, and it wrapped up the book series very nicely. I would like to know what happens afterwards though, because I think that will be really interesting to see how all the districts and what's left of the capital, I suppose, rebuild as a future. And if there's any other countries that sort of like maybe step in, because I'm still uncertain of whether the games are just set in America or if it's set in the northern hemisphere. And I say northern hemisphere, but like North America, which includes Canada as well, and how that sort of works out. I think that'd be really interesting. I don't think she necessarily would do that, I know, and apparently there's maybe like a sixth book series, well, a sixth book coming out in this series, and I can really see that happening. But I don't want her to stop writing, because she does it in such a good way that it just kind of like, you kind of get so absorbed into the book and you just want to know what happens next. I feel like this was also a really easy book series to like think of, or like create the actual, like, you know, when you can like start to see the actual book and how like the world building basically works out, even though there's obviously the movies, and I feel like that kind of like plays a part in how I view the books. I just wish I had read this series before watching any of the movies. I feel like that would have had a much bigger impact on me than having seen the movies first and then reading the books. That's the only thing I really regret. But all three of these books I rated a 5-star because they were just so good. I have my first DNF, so I'm coming to you guys barefaced so I can show you guys that book. I've had this book in my physical TBR for, I want to say maybe like 12 years. I've had this for so long, and it's even moved houses with me, but it's always kind of like sat at the back. And I've always been like, oh, I should probably get to that book soon, and then there's always something else that I decide to read instead. But this book is 6 Suspects. It's a hardback, and there's a lot. I don't really like hardbacks unless they are special editions. I don't really like to collect them otherwise. I have so many now from Illumicrate and Verily, but this is one that just didn't make the cut. I got to the first 2 chapters, and I didn't realise how many different perspectives there were going to be in this book. I assumed when we were going through the first chapter, we were going to just follow the voice of the, I think he's a journalist, and we were just going to get the story through him, and he was going to go through and doing his like journalist sort of work to get to the bottom of what happens. Turns out it's not that, and I think it's supposed to be every suspect has their own voice, but I'm not even surprised. I'm not even like fully understanding. Like, I don't know if the second chapter follows a voice of one of the 6 suspects, or if it's just some random person that got thrown into the plot. Like, it was really confusing. Started the 3rd chapter and there's like a new voice that's been introduced, and each character sounds exactly the same. And by that, what I mean is, like, you know how there's certain like each character usually has maybe some kind of like characteristics about them, or like a certain voice that you can kind of like pick up through the book. I feel like every single character was speaking the same, was as like, they were just so beyond descriptive that it made the story really boring to follow. And honestly, I didn't get to finish chapter 3. I think I turned the page and I finished like the first diary entry for that chapter, because for some reason chapter 3 was sort of like followed the diary entry sort of situation, and I didn't really like the format. So first we had the the journalist, then we had some other random person that was in power before and he got pulled out of power, and then he's now like, he's had his spirit taken over by Mahatma Gandhi, and then we've got the 3rd character who is supposed to be this really famous actress, and she's on a plane, she's like, honestly, they just sounded the same. And it got to chapter 3 and I was like, do you know what, I'm not gonna bother reading the rest of this book. I'm gonna DNF it, because I feel like if I was to continue this book, I was gonna end up in a massive reading slump, and I've literally fought hard to get back out of that, so I didn't want to end up back in that situation. So yeah, I'm DNFing this book. I don't really personally recommend it. I mean, I don't know if this is gonna get any better like later on down the line, but I've decided to stop because there's too much that's going on, and the way the book is it's just done in a way that I don't really like. I don't mind different characters. I don't really have an issue with like if one chapter's following one character and another chapter following another character, but I feel like they need to have distinct voices and they need to be separate. They cannot be exactly the same, whereas I feel like literally with the 3rd person in and they sound exactly the same, as if it's just one person and they're pretending to be different people. And honestly, it's not it for me. I'll literally tell you, or try and read the passage that I was just like, yeah, no, I can't do this. I literally stopped at chapter page 29. So we got to this particular point. Hold on, let me find it. So as we start the chapter 3, it follows the actress, and this paragraph was just solidified for me, like this, I can't keep reading this because this keeps happening with all the other characters as well. So we've got, take for example what happened yesterday on return flight from London. I had just entered the 1st class cabin of Air India 777, wearing my latest bottle green Versace jacket over denim jeans with a studded belt and dark Dior glasses. I settled down in my seat 1A as always and draped my Louis Vuitton crocodile skin handbag on the seat next to me, 1B, vacant as usual ever since the unfortunate incident on the flight to Dubai, the drunken passengers who tried to pull me. And honestly, that was just it for me. I was like, I can't keep reading this, because with the other characters there was still like so much description thrown at me, and sometimes I feel like it just gets really exhausting having to read from that, reading to something like that. It just isn't for me. So yeah, I'm DNFing this, and I'm actually very glad to be DNFing this, because I feel like I can't do it. And I also am becoming slightly more aware of what might end up putting me in a reading slump, and that's really what I don't want right now. So this is my first DNF of this particular episode. It took me a while to finish this book. I ended up taking a big break from it too. I don't know why particularly. I think I just ended up in like bad routines really, and I finally finished The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. This was a really good book. This basically follows Jon Snow, and sort of that's how we sort of learn to understand him as a character slightly better, and what sort of led to, or the events that sort of led to him becoming who he is. And I feel like it was really interesting to sort of showcase all of that. He basically just was someone who ended up in extreme poverty. Obviously, the war kind of did that, and they obviously had to fend a lot for themselves, and they had a lot of struggles and issues. But his cousin Tigress was really there for him, and I feel like he doesn't really give her the credit that she deserves. Like, she really sacrificed herself so that he could get his education, still be fed, and still do things that she had to drop out from. And I feel so bad for her. As the book sort of starts, you kind of get an idea that they obviously are struggling financially quite a lot compared to some of the other people, especially in his class, but how he's very specific about the type of um image he portrays about to everyone about the Snow family and the Snow legacy. But I feel like there's people that kind of look past that, and almost immediately he has like this sort of like clash with Dean Highbottom, which is one of the, I'm assuming, like teachers that are there. And eventually you find out that these guys in his particular year group are going to end up um involved in the actual Hunger Games, and basically whatever they do dictates how the 10th Hunger Games are. And it's the biggest change that we've seen in the actual way the Hunger Games are done and designed, and how the actual public is involved. And I really think this is a very like important pivoting point, because I feel like if the Hunger Games had continued on the way they previously had, they wouldn't have lasted as long as they did, until we get these classmates. Through the story, quite quickly, he ends up in loads of situations with Sejanus. And what I don't understand is, if you clearly do not like someone, you would kind of do what you can to avoid them. But I feel like Snow is a bit too obsessed with trying to keep a specific image portrayed continuously, and not having situations taken from him because someone else. But I feel like that was his downfall in a sense, because if he didn't really get involved, like, he could have still been a very different person, but then I guess we wouldn't have had Evil Snow and the freaking Hunger Games. But he just gets progressively worse and more controlling. Like, that part of him comes out, and even when he ends up with his tribute, what he sort of does with that, I'm surprised he survived all of that before the Hunger Games even kicked off. But like, what he sort of does to get Lucy Gray, that's his, I guess, tribute, to become friends with him, and like try and win this, but then also second guessing it all the time. I mean, understandably so, because of the type of her physicalness that was kind of explained in the book. But that compared to then just the way he ends up becoming so obsessed, it really just went from trying to like win to then becoming really heavily obsessed with her, and then like in his mind falling in love. But I really don't think he is capable of love. I think he's capable of only wanting comfort, and I think a lot of that came from just the jealousy from what and how Lucy Gray was attracting the attention that he so much sort of wanted to, because they kind of were supposed to be seen as like a team situation. But yeah, I feel like it just gets worse and worse and worse as it goes on. And again, the whole situation with Sejanus, like, I think if you clearly do not like someone, like, it does not make sense for you to like kind of keep intervening in situations that have that person involved, unless they directly affect you. Like, otherwise, like, don't. Dr. Cole's character, insane, so scary. She's definitely a maniac and evil, or probably should be locked up, not in a science lab. But yeah, I feel like her and Snow are two sides of the same coin, um, in a way, and their evil knows no depths. Like there is no end to what that. Like you think you found the pits of hell with the evil, but no, they will find a way to dig 10 times deeper to find a new level, and it just is never ending. It's never freaking ending. The way the Hunger Games ended, with Lucy winning, not really surprised because obviously he cheated, and then he gets caught, and then he gets sent off to do service with the peacemakers. My hands are so dry. But like he gets pulled in to do meetings with the not meetings, but he gets pulled out of college, and now he's told that he's got to go over here. So he's obviously very distraught. But then he's chosen to go into District 12 to find Lucy Gray because he thinks he's in love with her, and he clearly isn't. He clearly isn't. But like he's obviously in there. He's making really good progress. He's obviously sad about it and struggling in some capacity. But then Sejanus ends up popping up there too. The only reason that they end up being friends is because Sejanus is a familiarity of what is known in the capital, and I feel like the only reason he really ended up being friends with Sejanus because he understood what the capital is like, and I think he was under the impression that eventually they he, they would want to get back. I don't really know. Sejanus obviously had other freaking plans. Like this man was not trying to go back, and I fully understand that. But I feel like Snow used him in such an awful, awful way. Like I just can't look past that. It was insane. I feel like as soon as he found out that obviously he was up to something, he should have just let him go. He should have just let him go. Because again, if you hate someone and you don't want to be around them, just let them do their thing. And literally, he would have been out of his hair. Like none of that would have transcribed. He wouldn't have had to kill two two people and then one person through actions. But that was insane. Like I feel like that was such a massive betrayal of trust, but that was also so evil. And then not him like throwing up and being sad and like extremely like almost shitting his pants. But it's like you could have saved yourself all of that if you hadn't done any of that in the first place. But I feel like the only reason he ends up being pulled back into the capital was because he snaked on Sejanus in the way that he did. Because I feel like that really portrayed him being like capital through and through and only wanting what's best for the capital. Snow gets called back into capital rather than going to District 2, and now he's back in with Snow and he's doing all of these things. The last chapter really peed me off because it's like, what do you mean you literally hated this guy Sejanus? Now you're sitting buddy buddy with his parents, like they're living next door, you're getting them to pay for your university, you're doing all of these sort of things, and it's just like on the other hand, you had him killed. Beats me, makes no sense to me. Like, what is wrong with you? But also, I really hated the way that things ended with Lucy Gray because I really just want to know. I feel like that was one of those situations. Obviously, it's a cliffhanger, and there's so many possibilities with what could have happened to her. And I don't know if necessarily a body was ever found, and I don't think it's touched upon at all in any of the books, except for this. She's kind of just left as like a ghost, because that's the ballad with her name. And I feel like it would have been really nice to have a nice clean ending to that. I would like to imagine she found a way to escape, and I don't know if that was into District 13. Some people are saying that maybe it was into Canada. Some people are saying that maybe she ended up coming back into District 12 but living life as if she's no longer being able to be seen. But I don't think that would be the case because I feel like there's way too many people that will recognize her, and also the mayor was gunning down hard for her. So I feel like I don't really know if that was necessarily a possibility. um but yeah, no, that was insane. Like I feel so bad for her as a character because she had so much left for, and I think she'd been such a great person. Obviously the Covey were just doing their own little thing, but it's the fact that he just needs to, I think anything Snow touches destroys. Hate him, he's so evil. But he definitely got a taste for blood and killing because that's how he ended up like adapting, and that's what he ended up doing. Like he obviously killed the one person in the arena that was a tribute that he wasn't supposed to kill, but he ended up killing them. The second person he killed was, I think he was the guy from the Covey that was also part of the rebel plan about escaping. And then he obviously had Sejanus kill. So he's had 3 kills under his belt. And I feel like the more you sort of do it, the more, one, you lose yourself, but two, you end up getting a taste for it. Then he ends up poisoning Dean Highbottom when he goes back, and it's just like, are we really surprised he's the way that he is? He just loves killing off anyone that might possibly do something to jeopardize his self-image that he's so carefully tried to curate. But I hate him. I don't like him. But I'm so glad for this book because I feel like it really explained a lot of things. I wish I could go back and reread the entire books from the beginning. But again, I really wish I had read the book before watching that movie. I also finished reading Sunrise on the Reaping, but I think I ended up finishing this book within a week. This is not as long as I feel like the other books are, but this was one of those books where just things happen so fast, you kind of want to keep reading. I think the longest time I read was maybe like 3 hours, and I've read over 100 pages. I'm a very slow reader, so it takes me a long time to read, and it's about like just under 2 minutes per page. So yeah, and I kept like accidentally, my eyes kept skipping forward because I kept wanting to read what happens next and not actually reading the land that I was on, which was very silly of me. But yeah, I really love this book. I ended up having to get the hardback because I just couldn't wait anymore. And I kept seeing spoilers, and I love this really like cute quote on this. I just got this from Amazon, but I love the special edition of this. I think this is a really nice book, and I will obviously keep this while I can. My hands hurt, so I'm gonna just put this down. But it follows the story of Haymitch and the 50th Hunger Games. I want to say that every 25 is a quarter quell. But yeah, the 50th Hunger Games were insane, and I feel like his entire story is so sad because what happened to him should not have happened to him. He could have been frolicking in the meadow with the Nordov, and unfortunately, that just couldn't happen. That couldn't happen, and it was really, again, it's like a really big shame with what happens to him. But also, like, not only did I have like see the spoilers on TikTok and Reddit, but by the time we got to the section where he's been pulled in to the library to see Plutarch, but with Snow, like immediately I knew that he was going to end up and taking the Nordal from him the same way he took Lucy Gray. I just knew immediately that that's what's going to happen. I also really enjoyed Plutarch's character. I feel like he has a very specific image, and he's very careful with how he portrays himself in the capital versus how he portrays himself with the people that he's trying to like help fuel the rebellion with. And it's, I think once you read Hamish's games, you fully understand how he was one of the few I guess like a mockingbird, where they try, I think they call it mockingjays, but how he was supposed to be like the person to sort of set fuel to the rebellion. I mean, he did a good job with trying to destroy the arena, and I feel like once you read the book, there are so many similarities between him and Katniss. Like it's almost like seeing a mirror image of the two of them. Like it's, I want to say uncanny, but I don't know if that's really the word to use here. What I really enjoyed about this was seeing some of the other characters that we see in the actual Hunger Games books, especially like book 2 and 3. Like we met Wyris, we met Mags, we met BT. I think there's a couple of others that we met as well, and obviously Plutarch. There was a few others I think, and I can't really remember the names, but also the other people from like just seeing the Covey again, but also understanding the reflection and how Haymitch was actually friends with and related to or knew like Katniss's dad and obviously mum, but also other people within the place too. And it was sort of interesting how it was nice to sort of see those characters come forward. I want to say that I do think that Katniss has something to do or is some way shape related to the Covey somehow, because her father was known as like a really great singer. I think he's also known to maybe be related to or have something to do with the Covey. I can't remember because most of the times I read this book, it was like really late at night and I was already really delirious. But yeah, it was really interesting to see those sort of like parallels. But also, I felt so bad for Haymitch because literally everything got ripped away from him. Like that is insane. That is so sad. This is what I mean. There's no levels of how evil Snow will. You think he's reached that low level, but no, he'll find a way to dig 10 times deeper into the pits of evilness and hell and all sorts of stuff. Like last chapter, I think it was crying. I was crying as soon as I started the book. Chapter 2, 3, I was in tears. I just couldn't stop myself because it was just so insane with what happens. I'm really excited to go watch the movie, even though I know that I probably will have to take a whole box of tissues with me because I know I'm gonna cry throughout the whole thing, because it is obviously very, very deeply emotional. And Lionsgate had been a really good job with the trailers, and it's just insane. But no, the book was so greatly written. I just feel like the last chapter was like rushed a little bit too much. It was nice to sort of see how at the end he does sort of end up building some kind of a relationship with Peter and Katniss and the kids, and sort of like sharing his story with them. But it's really sad that he ends up like just closing the door on the world after what happens to every single person that he loved. Like his mum and brother died the way that they did. His love for the person that he really deeply cared about died as well, and almost at his hands, because of the gumdrops that he's sort of like feeding her. Obviously, he didn't realize that until afterwards, but it's such a shame that that had to go down and that had to happen. Like there was not one person that could have been left alive, and I think because of what happens to these three people who are big in his life, I think that's why he pushes everyone else away, so that nobody else can be hurt because of proximity to him. And that's really sad and a very lonely way of living. But it's just, oh, my heart goes out to him. But again, it was such a great book. I feel like the last chapter was just a little bit too rushed for maybe what it should have been. But again, amazing book. I really, really want to reread it, because I feel like that one I rushed to read, and I feel like I may have like missed certain parts. But no, again, 10 out of 10. Really would recommend. I feel like Hunger Games as a dystopian series is so well written, and it's making me want to get more into like dystopian novels and like series and stuff. So if you guys have any good recommendations for that, like I'm all ears. I do enjoy classics, and I do feel like every now and again I will delve into a classic. But I just did not like this book, and I feel like at the time when I read it, it really did go over my head. So that's a shame. Like I really feel like I had fully understood it when I was reading it. I don't know if I would necessarily go back and reread this though. I don't necessarily think I will. I think because I didn't like it the first time around, I don't really think I'm gonna like it the next time around. And I think this book basically just sums up that. I think I think this is supposed to have elements of basically mental illness. And what I understand is there's depression, self isolation, and extreme body dysmorphia, and then losing, obviously, and how that can lead to like losing maybe like the opportunity for work and all these other sort of things as well. Like you never know, like when it can hit, like you be fine before then, and all of a sudden the next day you can be hit by like extreme like self-image and like issues, but also like deep repression. I think that's what this book's supposed to summarize, but I didn't initially pick up on that until like really recently. But yeah, I'm glad that I'm glad that I had the chance to read this book. But I just don't see myself ever going back and pick this up again. If you really like this book, I guess you can tell me more about this. But for me, it didn't really hit the spot. I'm so sorry. But no, yeah, maybe I should try and read a little bit more like classic types of books. But I don't know. It's just unfortunately just wasn't for me. I think I'm gonna end up wrapping up this episode here, even though I could probably keep it going for another like couple of weeks and probably end up with more books. But I think I want to wrap up here just so I can have this on and I can like sort all these books out, because it's really bugging me, and I'll show you guys what my bookshelves look like too. So from this, I guess, episode, I'm unhauling, well, DNFing one book, and I'm definitely unhauling it. It just wasn't it for me. Yeah, it's a big no. I read this, but I'm also unhauling this. That's two unhauls in this, but this is part of like a collection, so I'll have to keep this until I finish reading all of the books and I can finally let the whole thing go. So that's at least two that I know that are definitely going to leave my home at some point. And then there's these 5 books that I'm definitely going to be keeping. I really want this lot to come out in a special edition, and I also want a book set which doesn't have this sticker already imprinted into it. But these are the 5 that I'm definitely keeping. This is actually a very heavy stack. So if I show you guys like a wider angle, this is basically what my bookshelves look like now. And I'm so glad, because it honestly just looks more appealing, and I'm glad that all my books are in one section. So previously I had sort of books stacked up on this bookshelf, not bookshelf, sorry, bedside table, and there was like over 130 here. And now the only books I want here is to fit in this bag and whatever book I'm currently reading. And that's all that will live here, nothing else. I've got my book journal, which is that purple thing, and my diary. Apart from that, and apart from like my body stuff that I use every time I've like showered, a bottle of water and some tissues and a clock, nothing else is going to live here, because I like the look of this being empty, and only for my main TBR to sort of be in here, unless I decide to like deviate a little bit, which is obviously absolutely fine. That is everything basically summed up. I will add how much books I have in my physical TBR, and then how much I have as like everything that I own somewhere here for you guys to sort of see. But that's everything for this one. Hopefully next episode I can have a lot more books to sort of share with you guys. There's a couple that I know that once I read I will unhaul them, so I'm kind of excited to be able to do that process. And I really do want to end up filming a massive like book unhaul at some point as well, because I feel like I can get to about maybe 30 possibly, so it'd be really nice to sort of get to that too. But that was everything for this episode. I hope you guys somewhat enjoy this. I'm still trying to figure out a name, so if you guys have any good suggestions, please let me know. But that's everything. I'll catch you whenever I do another update for this.